Hello, everyone. Tonight we are tracing the soft vibrations that run beneath your feet in the hush before a storm, those first tremors that signal something ancient, stirring something small and clever, preparing for the sky's fury. Picture it a wide, cracked plain so dry it hums like a tuning fork when you tap it with your boot. The sun hangs low, a bloated orange eye smudged by dust. And there, beneath the surface, something shifts, a subtle ripple of life, hiding from what's to come. You probably won't survive 5 minutes out here without sunscreen water and maybe a sturdy hat, but the creatures of this world, they've had millions of years to figure it out. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Post your location and your local time below. I want to know who else is still awake. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise and let's get started tonight. The ground beneath you is dry but not dead. You shuffle along, kicking up puffs of pale dust and feel a strange vibration tickle your soles. It's like standing over a giant drum or maybe the world's oldest phone set to vibrate. That's the first clue the frogs are already on the move, and they're not waiting for the rain to start. No, these amphibians, let's call them our ancient storm prophets, know when the pressure drops and the storm starts muttering on the horizon. They've got sensors in their skin so fine-tuned that they feel the change before the first cloud dares darken the sky. You pause. The cracks in the earth form a chaotic maze, but here and there you spot tiny disturbances, small scoops of dust pushed aside, faint impressions of webbed feet. It's almost like the frogs were polite enough to tidy up after themselves, but not quite. They're not just hiding from predators or the baking sun, they're digging their own storm shelters. Frogs of the deep past weren't just leaping about hoping for a puddle, they were engineers. Historians still debate whether the frog's instinct for burial was driven more by the need for moisture or protection from the storm's chaos above. Either way, the result is the same: they vanish. You kneel, brushing aside loose soil, and your fingers graze the mouth of a burrow. It's narrow, just wide enough for a frog to slip into and surprisingly smooth along the walls. This wasn't a frantic scrabble for safety, it was methodical. Imagine a creature no bigger than your palm, pausing in its dig to pat down the walls like some tiny builder checking the integrity of their storm shelter. It's like watching someone fold their umbrella before the wind can snatch it away. The frogs aren't alone in this. In the distance, a low rumble rolls across the plain. Thunder. Not yet. That's the sound of wind scraping over empty nests of trees, whispering warnings in leaves gone brittle. Somewhere behind you, something larger crashes through the brush, a predator perhaps too late to catch the frogs before they slip from view. There's always something bigger out here, and most of it is hungry. Fun fact: in ancient ecosystems like this, frogs weren't just snacks. They were essential indicators of ecosystem health. A sudden frog disappearance. That was like your weather app flashing an alert: storm incoming, take cover. You feel another tremor through your boots. The frogs are finishing their work. There's an odd sort of respect to it, isn't there? These little creatures so often overlooked, performing a ritual older than humanity itself. You smirk to yourself. We build storm shelters. They become them. And here's your off-topic gem for the night. Did you know that some modern frogs, descendants of these ancient burrowers, can slow their metabolism so much while buried that they're practically in suspended animation for months? Basically the amphibian version of hitting snooze on a storm. You look up, squinting at the horizon. The first cloud, dark and heavy, hauls itself over the edge of the sky. The wind kicks up, carrying the smell of distant rain, sharp metallic like stone and ozone, and promises. The frogs. They're already gone snug beneath the surface, waiting. You brush dust from your hands and rise, feeling that strange quiet that always comes before the world changes. The plain stretches out around you, deceptively empty. But now you know better. Below the surface, the frogs have claimed their sanctuary, and you, Well, you're left standing there wondering if maybe the tiny creatures had the right idea all along. You start walking again, your boots crunching over dry twigs, and the fine crust that forms when Earth dares to hope for rain. The trail you're following isn't marked by stones or sticks like some ancient human path. No, this one is subtle, a faint groove through the dust where tiny bodies drag themselves forward, webbed feet pushing bellies skimming the ground. The ancient frogs weren't random in their movements. Every line you see leads to one of those small burrow mouths. You crouch beside one, tracing it with a finger. The soil is cool beneath the surface. That alone tells you they knew where to dig. Historians still debate whether these frogs learned from watching the land or if some deep genetic memory guided their paws. Did one frog figure it out by accident during a storm and the rest simply copy? Or was the instinct born of endless cycles of trial and error etched into their blood? Either way, what you're looking at is no accident. The tunnels are placed where the soil is soft enough to dig, yet firm enough not to collapse. The frog's survival depended on getting it right. You shuffle forward following the faint lines. Here and there, the groove curves around a rock or diverts into a patch of tougher grass. You can almost hear the tiny grunts and determined huffs as each frog worked its way along seeking that perfect patch of earth. And it wasn't just one or two frogs. This was a mass movement, a migration so small in scale you'd miss it unless you knew where to look. Imagine that while massive dinosaurs thundered across the land beneath their feet, an entire hidden world of amphibian architects went about its business unnoticed. Speaking of unnoticed, fun fact, there's a species of frog today in Australia that can dig itself 3 feet down and stay buried for years waiting for rain. Now, I'm not saying these ancient frogs were quite so extreme, but clearly they had their own version of wait it out. You step carefully around a larger burrow, noticing how the entry is neatly disguised, with a sprinkle of dust almost like the frog reached back and covered its tracks. A little too neat, really. You smirk. It's like they were paranoid about nosy neighbors, or maybe just the giant storks that once patrolled this land snatching up anything careless enough to linger on the surface. A gust of wind cut across the plain, stinging your face with grit. You pull up your collar and glance at the sky. The clouds are thicker now, dragging their shadows over the earth. The frogs had no umbrellas, no weather apps pinging warnings. They had this trails carved with purpose tunnels, angled just so burrows lined in mud where the walls wouldn't cave in at the first splash of rain. You pause again at a cluster of burrows, each one about a foot apart, like some ancient frog apartment complex. Here the soil is finer, the digging easier. Did they communicate tap out little messages with their feet, warning each other of danger? Historians still debate whether frogs of this era coordinated their burrowing or if it was simply the power of shared instinct. Either way, the result is impressive and oddly peaceful. You stand among the silent entrances, imagining the frogs below, still and patient hearts slowing as they settle in. And then your foot slips. Just a shift of dust beneath your boot as a small patch gives way. You catch yourself with a laugh. Thanks, guys, you mutter to the hidden frogs as if they're listening. The ground here is honeycombed with their work, and for a moment you wonder how much of this plain is more burrow than soil. Another gust, sharper this time, brings with it that scent again, rain not far off now. You feel it on your skin in the way the air presses closer, heavier. The frog felt it too. That's why their trails end where they do. That's why you're standing over a masterpiece of tiny, determined survival. The ancient burrowers have gone to ground, and you're the last thing moving out here before the storm hits. Remember when humans evolved to build shelters, cities, entire empires? Frogs did it with nothing but feet and instinct. A silent testament to the simple genius of survival. You glance back at your own trail boots, heavy and clumsy, compared to the neat efficiency of the frog tracks. And just for a moment, you wonder who the cleverer architect really is. The air feels thicker now, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the first raindrop to fall. You lick your cracked lips, tasting the faint tang of moisture carried on the wind, a promise thin and fleeting, but enough to stir something deep inside you. The frogs buried beneath your feet knew it before you did. They didn't need to see the clouds or feel the breeze. Their skin told them what was coming. You press your palm flat against the ground, trying to catch that signal yourself. Cool, gritty, faintly damp, it's subtle, but it's there. The earth itself is beginning to change. Moisture in the air wasn't just a relief for parched tongues. For these ancient frogs, it was a lifeline. Historians still debate whether their underground retreats were primarily for hydration or for avoiding predators. Maybe both. But what's clear is this moisture meant survival. When the rain came, it soaked the burrows, softened the soil, and brought the frogs' world back to life. Without it, the land remained a cracked and hostile wasteland where only the toughest could cling on. You shuffle forward, boots sinking slightly now in patches where the ground is loosening. The frogs chose these spots on purpose, didn't they? You can almost picture them. Noses twitching as they tasted the air. Legs digging with frantic precision when they felt the first kiss of moisture in the breeze. You crouch low, brushing aside a clump of grass to reveal another burrow entrance, the rim darkened with damp soil. The frog that dug here knew what it was doing. Odd fact for you, some modern frogs have skin so sensitive they can detect the slightest change in humidity hours before rain begins. It's like having a built-in weather station, one that works without satellite data or Wi-Fi. You grin to yourself, imagining these ancient frogs as tiny meteorologists gathering their forecasts with nothing but instinct and skin. A sudden gust tugs at your hair, bringing that sweet, sharp scent of rain even closer. It won't be long now. The frog's strategy wasn't just about digging and hiding, it was about timing. Dig too soon and you waste precious energy. Too late, and you're caught on the surface, exposed to storks, snakes, or whatever else fancied frog for dinner. The frogs out here had perfected their sense of timing through generations. You look up at the darkening sky, thinking about how we humans still struggle to read the weather without apps and alerts. Meanwhile, a creature no bigger than your hand had it figured out before our ancestors even thought of making fire. The wind shifts again, cooler now, and you shiver as it snakes down your collar. Around you, the plain feels different, softer underfoot. The air heavy with anticipation. You glance down at the burrows, wondering how far below the frogs wait. What it feels like for them as the soil cools, as the first drops soak the crust and begin to trickle into the tunnels. Are they afraid? Excited historians still debate whether these frogs experienced anything we'd call emotion, or if they were simply following biological programming. But standing here feeling the same breeze, tasting the same moisture, you can't help but feel a kinship with them. Your foot sinks slightly into a patch of wet sand, the first true sign that the rain is near. You freeze listening, but all you hear is the wind and your own breath. No frogs, no birds, nothing. The world is waiting. You take a slow step forward, scanning the ground. The sky, the horizon, trying to catch the moment the storm finally arrives. The frogs are ready. Are you? And here's a little side note for you to mull over while you wait for that first drop in some parts of the world. Ancient peoples believed frogs controlled the rain. Maybe they weren't so far off. After all, the frogs always seemed to know when the rain would come. Maybe the real magic wasn't in summoning the storm, it was in listening to the earth as well as they did. The wind rises again, and this time it carries not just the scent of rain, but the cool sting of mist, the edge of the storm brushing past you as if to warn you almost here. You take a deep breath, tasting the promise of water, feeling the tension in the air. Below your feet, the frogs are waiting, buried in their damp shelters, trusting the moisture to bring them safely through the storm. You stand above them, a lone figure on a plain that's about to change, and you wonder, what would it be like just once to trust the rain that much? The wind has picked up now, threading through the cracked grasses in a low, whistling hum. You turn your head, half expecting to see some prehistoric predator step out from the shadows of the looming storm clouds, but no. The real hunters of this moment glide high above their wings, stretched wide, their sharp eyes trained on the ground. Ancient storks taller than a grown man once patrolled these plains with ruthless patience. You squint at the empty sky, imagining them circling, waiting for some unlucky frog too slow or too foolish to dig before the rain came. Historians still debate whether these storks migrated with the storms or simply followed the frog migrations, using the amphibians' uncanny sense of rain as their own weather report. Either way, the frogs and the storks were locked in a silent game of survival, one digging for safety, the other scanning for a meal. You crouch low, as if by lowering yourself you might better understand how it felt to be small and vulnerable on this wide exposed land. The burrows are still. The frogs have vanished beneath the earth. But the memory of their hunters lingers. You shift your weight boots, crunching on dry twigs. A shadow passes over you, just a cloud this time, but for a heartbeat your pulse jumps. That ancient fear of being watched, hunted, is hard to shake out here. And it's not just the storks that would have stalked the frogs. Giant lizards, snakes, even clever mammals that prowled the fringes of the wetlands, they all knew the pattern. Rain meant frogs, frogs meant food. The moment before a storm was a dangerous time to be a small creature in the open. And here's your odd fact for this section. Some species of modern herons and storks have been seen using bait like dropping leaves or insects on the water to lure fish. Imagine if their ancestors were just as cunning. Maybe even tossing pebbles or twigs at burrow entrances to coax a frog into poking out its nose. You can't help but admire the strategy, even as you're glad you're not on the menu. A sudden gust sends dust spiraling up around you. The plain is empty now, but you can almost hear the ancient stork's harsh cries carried on the wind like ghosts of the storm. You glance up, half smiling at yourself, getting spooked by imaginary birds. That's what this place does to you. The frogs had the right idea: dig deep, stay quiet, and wait out the storm. You shift your gaze back to the ground, tracing the faint, smooth edges of the burrows. Not a trace of their makers above the surface. No tracks, no droppings, nothing but the slight disturbance at the mouth of each hole. Historians still debate whether these burrows were always solitary or if frogs sometimes shared them, packed together in tight, damp clusters for warmth and safety. Imagine that: a tiny, silent frog society beneath the earth, listening to the storm's approach, hearts beating in unison. The wind howls again, sharp and cold, and you tuck your chin into your collar, thinking that maybe those frogs weren't just hiding from the storm, they were hiding from everything that came with it. Your boot kicks a small stone and it clatters across the cracked ground, loud in the hush. You freeze, as if the ancient hunters might hear it and swoop down. The storm's tension presses closer, the first drops so near you can feel them in the air, fat and heavy, waiting to fall. Above you, the sky has darkened to slate, the clouds churning like some great beast rolling in its sleep. And all the while, beneath your feet, the frogs wait, safe from the hunters, safe from the storm, trusting their burrows to keep them hidden until it's time to rise again. You stand there, caught between worlds, the empty plain above, the secret life below, and wonder what it must have been like to live with that balance every day. To be both predator and prey, to sense the storm before it broke, and to know exactly where to dig when it came. The sky above you groans a deep, rattling note like an old drum stretched too tight. You tilt your head back, watching as the clouds knot themselves into darker shapes like bruises spreading across the heavens. And still, not a drop. Not yet. You rub your arms against the rising chill and listen. That's when you hear it, a memory more than a sound. The frog's chorus, once so loud in these moments before the rain, 1,000 voices rising in a rhythm as steady as the coming storm, like drummers calling the clouds closer. But tonight, or at least in this vision of the ancient world, it's silent. The frogs are buried, their songs muffled by layers of soil. And maybe that's the point. Historians still debate whether the frogs' choruses were true calls to mates or if they served another purpose, warning perhaps, or celebration of the rain's approach. Either way, when they fell silent, the world seemed to hold its breath with them. You shift your weight uneasy in the hush. The lack of sound is almost louder than any storm. You take a few slow steps forward, your boots sinking slightly now where the earth has begun to soften. The frogs had it down to a science. They didn't just dig anywhere. They read the land the way we might read a map, picking the spots where water would pool first, where the soil would hold just enough moisture without drowning them. It wasn't guesswork. It was generations of knowledge passed through instinct. Imagine living your life guided by nothing but the feel of the wind and the weight of the air on your skin. Kind of humbling, isn't it? You pause near a shallow dip in the ground where water must have once gathered after storms like this. You can almost see it. The reflections of lightning, the ripples as frogs emerge to sing and breed and stake their claim on the temporary ponds. And here's your off-topic gem for tonight. Did you know there's a species of desert frog today that can remember the exact shape of the puddle it was born in? When the rains return, it finds that same puddle no matter how the land shifts. Memory in mud, you might say. The wind kicks up again, carrying the first cold splatter across your face. You flinch more from surprise than discomfort. The rain is here at last, tentative at first like the storm is still making up its mind. You stand there, feeling the rhythm of the drops, letting them patter against your jacket, your hands, your face. The frogs felt this too deep below the vibration of water hitting the soil, the promise of safety above as the world transformed. Historians still debate whether the frog's sense of rain was purely mechanical skin receptors twitching at the first sign of moisture, or if there was something deeper, something closer to what we'd call awareness. You look down at your own hands glistening with fresh rain and wonder if maybe we're not so different after all. The frogs buried themselves not just to hide, but to listen, to feel the storm's music through the earth and know when it was time to rise again. The rain falls harder now, drumming against the dry crust and turning dust to paste. You grin, the storm's cool breath waking you up. The frogs. They're still quiet, waiting for the right moment. You glance at the burrows one more time before turning your face to the sky, letting the rain wash over you, thinking that maybe, just maybe, we could learn something from these ancient, patient singers of the storm. The rain finds its voice at last, each drop fat and cold, smacking into the dust with tiny explosions that send up the scent of wet earth, rich, primal, and oddly comforting. You step forward and nearly slip your boot, skidding over a patch of ground that's transformed from crust to slick mud in moments. You catch yourself chuckling under your breath. The frogs knew this would happen. They prepared for it in ways that frankly put us to shame. Beneath your feet, their burrows are sealed tight with mud. They churned into place like little architects, making sure their homes didn't flood before the right moment. You kneel, pressing your palm into the wet soil. It's cool and smooth. A reminder that the frogs weren't just digging for safety, they were sculpting their shelters. Historians still debate whether frogs of this era evolved specifically to manipulate the mud or if it was a lucky byproduct of their digging technique. Either way, the effect is the same. The burrows hold snug and watertight while the storm above rages on. You swipe the mud off on your pants and grin. Maybe the frogs weren't just survivors. Maybe they were artists in their own muddy way. The wind howls again, but it's different now, softer at the edges as if the storm is settling into its rhythm. The plain is no longer dry and cracked. It's a patchwork of puddles streaked with rivulets of rainwater that carry tiny grains of sand into new patterns. You watch as the land reshapes itself, thinking about how each storm redraws the map and how the frogs' burrows endure beneath it all. Odd fact for the night, some species of modern frogs create a mucus plug inside their burrow entrance that hardens like a cork, keeping moisture in and predators out until they're ready to emerge. nature's own doorstop. You stand again, your boots squelching with each step. The mud tries to claim you, clinging to your soles like it doesn't want to let go. And for a moment, you can't help but feel like part of the landscape, just another creature caught between the sky's fury and the earth's patience. You glance at the burrows, their entrances now hidden beneath a thin glaze of water. The frogs are still down there waiting. Their silence is the storm's counterpoint, the unseen rhythm beneath the drumbeat of rain. Historians still debate whether these burrows were meant to be permanent structures or hastily built refuges for each storm. Some argue that the frogs returned to the same shelters year after year, like amphibian homesteaders. Others believe each storm triggered a fresh round of digging, the frogs adapting to the land's ever-shifting moods. As you wade through the mud, you can't decide which idea you like better. The image of a frog returning to its familiar time-worn burrow, or the thought of it carving a new home each time, reading the earth like a map that changes with every rain. A crack of thunder rolls across the plain long and low, like the earth itself groaning beneath the storm's weight. You flinch, then laugh, shaking your head at your own nerves. The frogs wouldn't have flinched. They'd be snug and safe, trusting in the strength of their burrows in the mud they molded with such care. You look up at the sky, letting the rain soak your hair, your face, your clothes, and you wonder, how did such small creatures come to master the storm so completely? The mud beneath you shifts again, soft and treacherous. But you don't move just yet. You stand still, listening, feeling the storm's power in your bones, in the ground, in the steady beat of rain on your shoulders. And somewhere deep below, the frogs wait, as they always have, trusting that when the time comes, the storm will have reshaped the world just enough for them to rise again. The rain keeps falling, but now it's gentler, more like a steady drum roll than the wild random clatter it was at first. You breathe in deep, the smell of wet earth, of mud and grass and old stone fills your lungs. You step carefully, feeling the ground give slightly under your weight, softened by the storm's work. And in that moment, you imagine it not just the hidden frogs themselves, but their voices muffled beneath layers of soil. A buried chorus waiting for the right moment to rise, as if the land itself hums with the promise of song. You crouch, placing your ear close to the mud, almost embarrassed at your own curiosity. But who wouldn't want to hear it? The ancient frog's chorus was no casual background noise. Historians still debate whether the vibrations of their songs served a purpose beyond communication, maybe to help coordinate mass emergencies, maybe even to signal when the storm's danger had passed. There's no way to know for sure, but as you kneel there in the rain, it's easy to believe the earth remembers. You close your eyes for a beat, listening, imagining the sound as it must have been deep and resonant, a vibration more than a melody, as much a part of the storm as the rain itself. And here's an odd little fact for tonight: some modern frogs can produce low-frequency calls that travel through the ground rather than the air, allowing them to speak even when buried. Nature always finds a way to keep the conversation going even when hidden from view. You rise slowly, your knees sticky with mud, and glance around. The land has changed again. Where once the plain was cracked and dry, it now glistens, every dip and hollow filled with water. Every trail softened into muddy memory. The burrow entrances have vanished beneath puddles their creators sealed inside, waiting. The frog's silence feels like part of the storm's rhythm now, the hidden beat beneath the patter of the rain. Historians still debate whether these ancient frogs chose their burrow sites for acoustics, whether some spots were better for feeling the chorus through the ground. You like to think so, that even in the quiet of their burial, the frogs found a way to stay connected, to hum, along with the storm, to remind each other, we are still here. You take a step, then another, careful not to disturb what lies below. The frog's world, hidden but not gone, hums beneath your feet. The storm seems to soften further, as if it's listening too. The rain falls in smaller drops now, like the sky is catching its breath. And for a moment you stand in the hush between storm and silence, imagining the frog's buried chorus, the hidden music of survival waiting to rise again with the water. You move slowly now, every step squelching in the soft mud as if the land itself wants you to linger to notice what lies beneath. You crouch again, fingers brushing the ground, feeling the subtle ridges where burrows once began, where ancient frogs shaped their shelters with surprising precision. You press your palm flat, sensing the compacted layers beneath layers, not just of soil, but of history molded by tiny, determined architects who lived and died by the rhythm of the rain. Historians still debate whether the frogs' burrows altered the land over generations, whether their digging changed the way water moved across these plains, creating microhabitats that shaped entire ecosystems. The thought makes you smile. Imagine that creatures no bigger than your hand leaving a mark on the world, not through dominance, but through patience, through the slow, steady work of survival. It's humbling, really. We humans tend to think big pyramids, walls, cities. The frogs built their legacy in mud. You trace one of the faint ridges, the soil still firm beneath the surface despite the storm. The frogs knew just how deep to go, just how tight to pack the walls. And they didn't stop there. Some burrows twist and curve, creating chambers where water could seep in without drowning their occupants, natural drainage engineered by instinct. It's the kind of design that would make any architect jealous. And here's your odd fact for tonight: modern spade-foot toads can dig backwards using their hind legs like tiny shovels, kicking the soil away as they disappear underground. You wonder if their ancient cousins did the same, vanishing backward into safety while the storm rolled in. The rain eases to a soft patter, the kind that soaks deep into the ground instead of running off in streams. You rise, wiping your muddy hands on your jacket, and look out over the plain. The land glistens, the puddles reflecting the storm's retreating clouds like broken mirrors. You take it all in: the quiet, the wet hush, the invisible world beneath your feet where the frogs wait, their work done, their shelters holding firm. Historians still debate whether these burrows were ever reused by other creatures, whether once the frogs emerged, snakes or insects or small mammals claimed the ready-made shelters for their own. Standing here, you can believe it. Nature doesn't waste effort. What one creature builds, another will inherit. The frogs' burrows were part of a larger web, a hidden architecture that tied the land together in ways we're only beginning to understand. You step carefully, respecting the work beneath you, feeling the ground's subtle give where the tunnels thread through the soil. The frogs shaped this place not with force but with persistence. And as the last drops of rain fall, you realize that the storm didn't just test their survival, it revealed their legacy written in mud and silence. The storm's anger has faded now, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean, glistening, and new. You walk carefully across the soaked plain, each step sinking just enough to remind you of what lies beneath. And then you spot them, faint winding lines near the edges of the puddles, tracks that don't belong to frogs at all. You crouch for a better look. These are the marks of ancient hunters, patient and relentless. Giant centipedes, their many legs leaving parallel streaks in the soft mud as they crept toward the burrows, drawn by the promise of a meal. You shudder a little at the thought. Centipedes as long as your forearm, armored and swift, waiting at the mouths of burrows for frogs to re-emerge. Historians still debate whether these predators followed the frogs' trails by scent or simply by knowing the frogs' patterns so well that ambush was inevitable. Either way, it worked. The centipedes thrived wherever frogs did, their fates intertwined in the endless game of predator and prey. You trace one of the tracks with your finger, imagining the creature that made it, antennae twitching, jaws ready. The rain has left the land soft and pliable, perfect for holding these fleeting records of the storm's aftermath. You stand scanning the ground for more signs. Here, a smear where a centipede must have lunged. There, a collapsed edge of a burrow where perhaps the weight of water or the probing of a hunter disturbed the entrance. The frogs beneath are safe for now, but danger waits above, patient as the storm itself. Odd fact for you tonight, some modern centipedes can detect the vibrations of a heartbeat through the ground, allowing them to zero in on hidden prey. You can only imagine what their ancient cousins were capable of with more time and fewer humans to get in the way. You glance around half expecting to see one of these old-world hunters still lurking among the puddles, but of course the plain is empty. The centipedes left their mark and moved on their work as much a part of the storm's story as the frog's burrows. Historians still debate whether the centipedes hunted alone or in groups. The idea of them swarming a single burrow is enough to make you step back instinctively, as if the ground beneath you might split open and release them again. But the burrows hold the frogs hidden deep inside, waiting for the right moment. You exhale slowly, realizing how much of this ancient drama played out in silence, in patience, in the careful balance between predator and prey. The rain has almost stopped now, just a mist drifting on the breeze, the sky lighter at the edges where the sun begins to break through. You take one last look at the centipede tracks, knowing that soon the puddles will erase them, the mud will smooth over, and the story of this storm will fade into the next. But for now you've seen it. The hidden hunters, the careful architects, the world beneath the storm's skin. The first cold splatter catches you off guard. Not rain this time, but a drip from the branch of a stunted tree overhead, shaken loose by the storm's passing. It hits your cheek and slides down, joining the beads of rain already clinging to your skin. You wipe it away, glancing up at the thinning clouds where pale sunlight begins to burn through the gray. And as the light shifts, so does the land. The plain is no longer just a patchwork of puddles and mud. It's a mirror reflecting the sky's slow return to calm. You stand still, watching the water ripple as a breeze stirs it. And then, without fanfare, without drama, the frogs begin to awaken. You don't see them at first, not really, but you hear it. The soft pop of a burrow breaking open, the faintest splash as a webbed foot tests the surface of a new puddle. The frogs rise from the mud as if the storm itself summoned them, their slick bodies glistening, their eyes bright and watchful. It's a quiet emergence, but one that carries the weight of countless generations. Historians still debate whether the frogs timed their emergence to specific cues: the angle of the sun, the temperature of the air, the feel of moisture on the roof of their burrows. Some argue it was pure instinct, others that it was more complex, a delicate dance between biology and environment. Either way, what you're seeing is no accident. The frogs know the storm has passed, that now is the time to reclaim the world above. You crouch low, watching as one frog hauls itself from its burrow, its skin still streaked with wet mud. It pauses, breathing deep, tasting the air. You can almost hear its silent sigh of relief. Another follows, and another, until the plain seems to come alive again. Tiny bodies dotting the landscape, each one a survivor of the storm's test. The first raindrop they felt may have sent them into hiding. But this rain, the soft rain of the aftermath, is their invitation to return. Odd fact for you tonight. Some modern burrowing frogs have a layer of skin that peels away in sheets. After heavy rain, shedding the protective cocoon they formed while buried. You watch as one frog shakes itself, sending off a fine spray of water and dirt, and you wonder if its ancient cousins did the same, discarding the last remnants of their underground exile to greet the storm-washed world. The plain is no longer empty. The frogs claim it now, their small bodies reflected in the shallow pools, their voices not yet raised in song, but ready, waiting for the right note to begin. You stand feeling the weight of the moment, the balance between danger and safety, between storm and calm. The frogs knew the storm would come, knew how to endure it, and now they know it's time to rise. You smile, watching the first bold jumper launch itself into a puddle, sending ripples across the mirrored surface of the land. Historians still debate whether these frogs saw their emergence as simple survival or something closer to ritual, a celebration of the storm's passing, of the world reborn in rain. Standing here, you can believe it's both. The frogs rise, the storm retreats, and the ancient dance begins anew. You take a step back, giving the frogs their space, watching as more of them break through the softened soil, their bodies gleaming like little jewels washed clean by the storm. The rain has eased to a mist now, fine as breath, and the land hums with quiet energy. And then it hits you, not just the sight of them rising, but the realization of what you're witnessing. This isn't just survival, this is ritual. The frogs didn't bury themselves purely out of fear. They did it because the storm was part of the rhythm of their world, a signal, a turning point. Historians still debate whether the frogs' burial before rain was entirely about staying safe, or whether it was a kind of offering to the storm itself. You can't help but wonder, standing here among them, if the act of burying was their way of marking the storm's arrival, of acknowledging the power of the sky and the gift of the water it brought. Each burrow a silent prayer, each emergence a quiet thank you. You watch as one frog pauses at the edge of a puddle, its throat pulsing, its sides heaving as it breathes in the storm's aftermath. The mud clings to its legs in delicate spirals, like it was sculpted that way on purpose. And maybe it was. Maybe in their own wordless way, the frogs honored the storm not just by hiding from it, but by becoming part of it, by blending into the mud, by shaping their world with burrows that turned the chaos of rain into shelter. Odd fact for tonight. Certain modern burrowing frogs are known to dig themselves in facing a specific direction, usually toward the source of seasonal rains. Scientists still aren't sure how they know where that is, but the accuracy is uncanny. You glance at the scattered burrows across the plain, imagining the ancient frogs doing the same, their faces turned toward the promise of water, their backs to the storm's fury. The breeze stirs again, cool and sweet, carrying the scent of wet grass and clean earth. The frogs begin to move more now, venturing from their burrows, testing the puddles. The mud, the world made new by the storm. You stand still, feeling like an intruder at a ceremony, as if you've stumbled into a gathering not meant for human eyes. The frogs rise, not in panic, not in haste, but with purpose, with grace, as if they know this is their moment. Historians still debate whether these ancient frogs shared these moments with one another consciously, or whether it was simply the synchronicity of instinct. But you can see it now, the way they emerged together, as if the storm's passing was a cue only they could truly hear. You take a slow breath, watching the ritual unfold, feeling the weight of the storm lift, replaced by the quiet joy of rebirth. The air hums with life now, not loud, not yet, but steady, as if the land itself exhales after holding its breath through the storm. You shift your stance, boots heavy with mud, and watch as the frogs continue their slow, deliberate emergence. They rise like ghosts of the storm, glistening and dark, their bodies slick with rain and soil, their eyes wide and bright. The storm has blessed them, and they wear its remnants like a crown. The first true puddles of the season spread at their feet, shallow and glimmering in the soft returning light. You step closer to the largest of these pools, careful not to disturb the fragile surface. The frogs gather here, drawn as if by some unseen signal. Their movements are calm, purposeful, no wild leaps or panicked splashes, just the quiet claiming of a world reborn by rain. Historians still debate whether these gatherings were purely biological responses or if there was a deeper social component. Did the frogs recognize one another in these moments? Did they feel something more than instinct at work as they joined their voices and bodies at the storm's gift? A soft trill rises, tentative at first, then joined by another and another until the air vibrates with the first true chorus of the aftermath. It's not the deafening roar you might expect from a pond alive with frogs. It's gentler, as if they're tuning their voices to the rhythm of the fading rain. You smile, caught in the spell of it, the music of rebirth. And here's your odd fact for tonight. Some modern frogs can change the pitch of their call depending on the depth of water, adjusting their song to match the conditions of each storm. Imagine that, amphibian composers adapting their symphony to the landscape. You kneel at the water's edge, watching as the frogs dip their heads, their backs glistening with beads of rain. One flicks out its tongue, catching some unseen insect, already drawn to the damp. The storm's bounty isn't just water, it's life new, and fragile and ready to bloom. The frogs know this, they don't waste time. Even as the last drops fall, they begin the next part of their cycle, feeding, calling, preparing. The storm's work is done. The frog's work begins. Historians still debate whether these ancient frogs saw storms as mere challenges to endure or as gifts to celebrate. Standing here hearing their chorus rise, watching them glide through the fresh pools, you don't need the answer. You can feel it in the air, in the water, in the quiet joy of the frogs as they claim the world remade by rain. The breeze carries their song across the plain, a hymn to survival, to patience, to the storm that came and passed, leaving the land and its small kings of mud renewed. You wade forward, boots sinking deeper with each step into the soft, rain-fed earth. The world feels different now, heavier, richer, like the storm has breathed new life into every crack and hollow. All around you, the temporary ponds gleam like polished stone, their surfaces rippling with the first curious touches of frogs. The air smells of wet grass, of clean mud, of promise. You pause at the edge of a broad, shallow pool, watching as the frogs begin their next ritual, the laying of eggs, the seeding of life in water that might last only days. The frogs move with purpose, unhurried, yet sure. Their bodies pressed together in the shallows, slick and glistening. Their legs churning the mud into a protective cloud around the delicate strands of eggs. Historians still debate whether these gatherings were cooperative or competitive, whether the frogs worked together to protect their future young, or if it was every frog for itself, each one staking out the best spot for its spawn. Either way, the result is the same. The ponds become cradles, temporary nurseries cupped in the land's hands, holding the next generation against the sky's whim. You crouch low, watching as the eggs glimmer in the murky water, strings of jelly anchored to submerged grass and sticks, already beginning to pulse with life. The frogs knew this would happen. They waited for this. The storm wasn't just a threat, it was the key that unlocked this part of their world. You smile at the thought. The storm comes. The frogs rise and the cycle begins again, as sure as the sun climbing back through the clouds. Here's your odd fact tonight. In some modern frog species, the jelly around the egg swells as it absorbs water, creating a protective cushion that keeps the embryos moist, even if the pond begins to shrink. You glance at the puddles, imagining the ancient eggs doing the same, adapting to the uncertain gift of each storm. The frogs have learned not to trust the water will stay, but they make the most of it while it's here. The plain hums softly with the frog's chorus, the sound mingling with the sigh of the breeze, with the last faint patter of the storm's retreat. You stand slowly, mud clinging to your boots, and look out over the pools. In every one, frogs move and sing and seed the future, their tiny bodies dwarfed by the vastness of the land and the sky, but no less important. Historians still debate whether these ponds were remembered from year to year, whether the frogs returned to the same cradles time and again, or if they simply went where the rain led them. Watching them now, it hardly matters. The ponds are here, the eggs are laid, and the frogs have claimed their fleeting kingdoms. You stand at the edge of the largest pond, the water dark and deep. In the middle, its surface broken by the occasional ripple where a frog dives or a bug skitters. The land moments ago, a barren, cracked plain, is now transformed, a flooded world, temporary but complete. The frogs are everywhere now, perched on muddy islands, gliding through the water, their throats swelling as their chorus rises. You can feel it in your chest, that low, rhythmic pulse of voices, as if the land itself is singing through them. These are the frog kings of this flooded realm. Each one claims a piece of the water, a patch of mud, a slice of sky. Their songs weave together, not in chaos, but in an ancient harmony shaped by storms long past. Historians still debate whether these songs were meant only for rivals and mates, Or if they served a greater purpose, perhaps to declare ownership of this brief kingdom, to stake a claim on the storm's gift while it lasted. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you, a music older than language, older than memory. You wade a little deeper, the water lapping at your boots, cool and clear. A frog watches you from a clump of grass, unblinking, as if daring you to enter its domain. And why not? For this moment, these flooded fields belong to the frogs. The storm made kings of them, if only for a while. And here's your odd fact for tonight. Certain modern frogs can adjust the volume and pitch of their calls to match the acoustics of their temporary ponds, turning each puddle into a natural amplifier. You glance around, imagining the ancient frogs doing the same, crafting a symphony from stormwater and mud. The sun breaks through the clouds at last, turning the pools to silver mirrors, the frogs' dark shapes outlined against the shimmering light. They move with the confidence of rulers, knowing that the world has changed, if only for a little while. Historians still debate whether these moments shaped the frog's evolution more than any other force: the storms, the floods, the rise and fall of their water kingdoms. Watching them now, it's hard to argue. The frogs are masters of the fleeting kings of the in-between, and in their brief reign the land sings with life. You stand still, aghast in their realm, and let the frogs' voices fill the air, a chorus of survival, of celebration, of the storm's passing and the world remade. The storm has moved on now, trailing its tattered cloak of clouds toward the horizon, leaving behind a hush that feels almost sacred. You stand knee-deep in mud and shallow water boots, heavy heart, quiet, watching the last of the rain drip from twisted branches and tall grasses. The frogs are everywhere, still calling, still moving, but the frenzy has softened. The wild urgency of the storm's aftermath has settled into something gentler, as if the land itself sighs in relief. You take a slow step back from the water's edge, careful not to disturb the fragile pools where eggs float like tiny beads of glass. The frogs' voices echo across the plain, carried by the breeze that smells of wet earth and clean air. You can feel the peace of it, the balance restored. Historians still debate whether these quiet hours after the storm shaped the frogs' behavior as much as the storm itself. Whether this pause was as important to their survival as the digging, the hiding, the singing. Standing here, you believe it. The quiet matters. The waiting matters. The land looks different now, softened at the edges as if the storm blurred its sharp lines. Puddles glisten where once there were cracks. Mud clings to everything, binding the world together in a patchwork of brown and silver. The frogs linger at the pools, their voices growing fainter as the first rays of warm sun stretch across the plain. Soon the water will begin to shrink. The mud will harden again. But for now, this moment belongs to the frogs. They have claimed the storm's gift and made it their own. Here's your odd fact for this final stretch. Some modern frogs are known to bury themselves again once the ponds begin to dry, returning to the earth until the next storm. The cycle is endless, patient, sure. The frogs know the world will change again, and they're ready for it. You glance down at the burrows now hidden beneath the pools, and you smile. The frog's work is never done. The storm may end, but the dance continues. Historians still debate whether these ancient frogs inspired early humans to read the weather, to mark the seasons, to learn patience from the small and silent teachers at their feet. You like to think so. After all, who better to teach us about resilience than a creature that survives by listening to the storm, by trusting the rain, by knowing when to rise and when to rest? You stand there, letting the frogs' voices fade into the soft rustle of the breeze, the gentle lap of water against mud. The storm is gone, the world is quiet, and the frogs have left their mark as they always do, written not in stone or fire, but in water and earth and song. The storm has passed, and with it the ancient frogs have completed their quiet ritual of survival. From the first tremors beneath your feet to the chorus that rose with the storm's end, you witness the patient genius of these small creatures digging their burrows with precision, sealing themselves in with mud, waiting out the fury above, and emerging at just the right moment to claim the storm's fleeting gift of water. The land transformed, and so did the frogs rising from the earth to become kings of the temporary ponds filling the plain with their voices, their eggs, their promise of new life. Historians still debate what drove these frogs: the instinct of survival, the memory of countless storms, or something closer to ritual, a dance with the rain that shaped their world. And ours? The frogs taught us, if we care to listen, about resilience, patience, and the wisdom of knowing when to act and when to wait. Now, as the sun returns and the pools begin their slow retreat, the frogs' voices fade, but their story lingers, written in the mud and the quiet left behind. And so the storm song ends, but the frogs are ready for the next storm, for the next beginning.